This is not a video about heating a house, but that is where we're going to start. If you're just looking for a video that confirms what you already know, this is not a video for you. We're going to use some very basic scientific principles to think about these topics and hopefully challenge some of your thinking. So if you're into that, strap in. Before we begin, I need to ask something of you. You're welcome to write comments, but I ask that they are relevant to the video. This is not a video about climate change or politics, so let's avoid those things. No matter how well I research, I am going to get things wrong in this video. If you find something that's wrong, it'd be a huge help if you point it out in the comment. One of my favorite channels on YouTube is Technology Connections. It explains brilliantly the engineering concepts behind common technology with humor. If you haven't watched it before, I recommend it. One of their videos talks about the efficiency of space heaters, and I think I have something to add to the story. Let's be clear about what Alec gets right. Every 1500 watt space heater will indeed create heat at a rate of 1500 watt. Alec states that the claims made by many manufacturers are false, and he's right. But Alec also claims no matter where the heat is released into a room, it will eventually spread out. Let's give an example where that's not the case. Here is a diagram of a bedroom with fairly high ceilings. The space heater is in red, and the red arrows show the hot air rising. The air around the ceiling will heat up, yes, but the bottom of the room will stay cool. We aren't getting a smooth circular flow through the room. Humans are heavier than air, so typically spend their time within 2 meters of the floor. Heating air above 2 meters of the floor will not help much. Some of the heat will spread, yes, but not most of it. Now we have a room with warm air up high and cold air down low, but we're heating with 100% thermal efficiency. And yet, as you can see from this example, we can do better. A ceiling fan can mix the air. It's not just that you create heat, but where that heat goes. Let's start with some scientific principles. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. If you power an electric heater, the energy going into it must be equal to the energy coming out of it, so its thermal efficiency is 100%. It's a bit unintuitive because we're used to home appliances that run at less than 100% efficiency, but eventually all that energy ends up as heat. Let's compare two electric egg beaters. One has 60% efficiency, the other 50%. This means that one converts 60% of electrical energy to mechanical energy and then to heat. In both cases, 100% of the energy they consume gets converted to heat eventually. The same principle is true when we run an electric heater. All the energy ends up as heat, but this time heat is our goal. So all electric heaters run at 100% efficiency. So just mix all the air up with a fan, right? Now things are going to get interesting because we're missing an important piece of the puzzle. When we're in a room, what warms us? It's more complicated than you think. While you think about the answer to this question, I'll address a technicality. What heats a human is themselves. You're constantly generating heat. We need to lose some of it, but not too much. So where do we lose this heat to, and what stops us from losing too much heat, besides clothes and evaporation? If you remember back to high school physics, there are 3 types of heat transfer: conduction, convection, and radiation. Conduction is the transfer of heat by direct contact. Think touching a hot rod or heat traveling along a copper rod. Convection is when there is movement within a liquid or gas, taking heat with it. Think a space heater heating up the room or a boiling pot of water. Thermal radiation is just electromagnetic energy. Think about the warmth of a wood fire when you stand in front of it. You're not touching the fire, but you feel its heat. So where do we lose heat to? We conduct heat away and radiate heat away. So if you said air, you have half the answer. About 40% of our energy is conducted into nearby air. Roughly 60% of our heat energy is radiated away. If you only think about air temperature, you are missing half the equation and you will reach inaccurate conclusions. Let me give you an example. Imagine you've left your car in the sun on a windy day. The car is hot and the air inside the car is hot. Imagine you open all the doors, air the car out, then get in the car and close all the doors. You'd still feel warm in the car. Why? Your car is radiating heat onto you. Now you might think, what's the big deal? A space heater heats the air heats the objects, now the room is warm. In fact, it's not so simple, and it makes a big difference when comparing different heating systems. What Alex says is completely true when comparing space heaters, but not when comparing different heating systems. Some heating systems require less energy to make us feel comfortable, despite them all being 100% thermally efficient. Let's take a look. Let's start with systems that heat the air first. You walk into a cool room and turn on a space heater or forced air heating system. It first heats the air by conduction, which then gets transferred by convection. You might heat the air quickly, but it can take an hour for the objects in the room to heat up. Where the air goes is important. Losing hot air to a draft is obviously a loss of energy. Hot air near the ceiling is less effective than air that gets mixed well. Now, radiators. Oddly, radiators don't radiate much heat. They mostly heat the air, which convects up and sits close to the ceiling. They're more similar to space heaters than most people think. So what about floor heating? You heat the floor, which heats the room in all three ways: conduction, convection, and radiation. You don't have a concentrated heat source, so the convection component at least mixes well. Electric radiant heaters have been around for a while, but new units are much better for indoor use. You might be used to them outside of the pub, where they beam heat at you, but do little to heat the surroundings. Radiant heat is not related to nuclear radiation and are not microwaves. It's the warmth you feel from a wood fire. It's a bit like standing in warm sunshine, but with no UV. The indoor units are a bit different to the outdoor units. They're not as hot, so they're hot to touch but won't burn you. They're less intense, which means you won't get too hot. The outdoor ones typically heat you if you're in their heat path, whereas the indoor ones heat you directly, yes, but also heat up the objects around you. Warm objects then both re-radiate heat and also heats the air by conduction, then convection. On top of energy consumption, all these options feel a bit different, and that's subjective. I like the feeling of a wood fire radiating warmth onto me, or of standing in the sun, but I also love standing against a warm radiator. Some people love a warm floor. Which do you prefer? Share in the comments. Okay, let's compare space heaters to radiant heaters. Space heaters heat the air, which travels close to the ceiling, eventually heating the rest of the room. Radiant heaters heat you and the objects around you, eventually heating the air. Both have a thermal efficiency of 100%, but one is more effective. Both will heat the objects and the air eventually. Put a person in a room for a day, let them heat to the point where they're comfortable. Not a fixed temperature, but to the point that they're comfortable. And you will find that they use up to 30% less energy with radiant heaters. If that claim sounds crazy to you, just remember it's something we could measure in an experiment. You don't have to be convinced quite yet, just understand why it might be the case and that it can be measured. At the beginning, I said this is not a video about heating your home. If you care to indulge me for a bit of philosophy, watch on. I think there are a few ways we can decide for ourselves what's true. We can trust an authority, whether that's the TV, the newspaper, our friend, or the internet. We can listen to our gut, use our intuition, go by what feels right. We can use reason and logic, that is, rationality. We can observe something or test it with an experiment, that is empiricism. So next time you see a problem differently to another person, you shared your logic, they shared theirs, ask, can this be tested with an experiment? Maybe you'll both learn something. So how did Alec come to a different conclusion to me? Alec used logic, good logic, but missed that a heater doesn't heat evenly. I think he focused too much on thermal efficiency. Alec does some experiments comparing space heaters, and he was right about space heaters, but he never experimented with other types of heaters. And that's fair enough. His video was specifically aimed at space heaters. It's also important to remember that there are different ways to analyze a problem. If Alec tells us that electric space heaters have a 100% thermal efficiency, we can be very adamant that this applies to all electric heaters and miss that some heaters do behave differently. That's not a mistake he makes, but I do see some people online taking his information and making that mistake. We can miss that thermal efficiency isn't the right metric to optimize for, nor is just air temperature. I'm going to be creating more videos that challenge you and make you think. So if you want more, subscribe. Thanks for watching.